Nobody knew the exact moment the Council passed the resolution. No broadcast, no warning, just a silent, unanimous vote among 12 alien empires that humanity, earthborn, flame-hearted, endlessly defiant, was too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And like that, humans were outlawed across the galaxy. Ships were recalled. Colonies were bombed from orbit. Human names were erased from the official archives of the Union systems. Entire star systems, once home to Earth's pioneers, were turned into barren no-man's zones, quarantined and watched by patrol drones that reported back to their smug, complacent masters. It wasn't personal, the Council claimed. Humanity was simply volatile, unpredictable, aggressively adaptive. It wasn't one war or one weapon. It was everything. The wars they started and the ones they refused to lose. The machines they created that evolved too quickly. The colonies they founded on planets deemed uninhabitable. The way they refused to obey. But no one really believed humanity was gone. Not entirely. Not for good. That suspicion proved right 7 years later. It started small, on a quiet mining station orbiting Vexa 9. A minor incident. A reactor breach, they said. A power overload. No survivors. That's what the official report claimed. But the wreckage told a different story. An artificial gravity field that had been hacked, twisted into a pulse weapon. No Vexari technology was capable of that. But human tech was. Especially the old Terran deep space engineers, the ones who could make death traps out of power cores and wrenches. By the time the Council realized this wasn't an isolated case, 10 more outposts were gone. Silence. No distress signals. Just systems gone dark, drone footage corrupted, sensor logs scrambled, entire settlements erased, and in each case, always one thing left behind. A message carved into metal, scrawled in old Earth standard. You banned the species. You didn't ban the consequences. Admiral Kavak of the Drossary High Fleet was the first to break rank, demanding a full investigation. He'd fought humans in the border wars 30 years prior. He remembered how they fought, not with honor, but with desperation. How a single human scout team wiped out his entire battalion using explosives made from kitchen waste. He'd spent a decade lobbying to quarantine Earth long before the vote happened. Now, as more systems reported disturbances, he knew this was no coincidence. They hadn't killed all the humans. They'd simply given them a reason to stop pretending they cared. Meanwhile, deep in a forgotten sector of space, hidden between gravity wells and black star fields, humanity had never stopped building. They called it the Exile Swarm. Tens of thousands of ships, not sleek, not beautiful, brutal things. Repurposed mining haulers, war-fractured dreadnoughts, even hollowed-out asteroids turned into mobile weapons platforms. At the center of it all, the Leviathan. A massive Earth-born colony ship that had been assumed destroyed in the Exodus War. Inside it, a man named Rhys Maddox, once a soldier, now something much more, watched the Council broadcasts with a face like carved stone. His hair was gray, his voice cracked from breathing recycled air for decades, but his eyes still burned with the same fire that the Council tried to extinguish. They thought they could ban us, he said to his crew, his voice echoing through the steel chamber. But we were never just a species. We were a virus. We adapt. We wait. And when the time is right... He looked to the stars beyond the viewport. We infect. And the countdown began. The swarm didn't move like a fleet. It moved like a rumor, a whisper of dread that swept from system to system before the ships themselves ever arrived. Sensors would flicker for seconds, ghosts on the edge of radar, pings that disappeared too fast to track. Then came the shutdowns, communications going dead, stations going silent, entire trade lanes blinking out like someone pulling stars from the sky. By the time the council realized the exile swarm had mobilized, dozens of fringe colonies had already been cut off. No attacks, no demands, just silence. The kind of silence that made generals sweat. Rhys Maddox wasn't interested in conquest. He wanted retribution, not flashy vengeance. No broadcasts, no planetary bombardments. That wasn't humanity's way anymore. They'd learned. They'd evolved. What he wanted was far more terrifying. Obsolescence. He wanted to make the galaxy afraid of forgetting Earth. Afraid that in banning humans, they'd buried a ticking bomb beneath the very order they worshipped. Inside the Leviathan, silence was rare. Every corridor hummed with motion. Children born in exile ran through halls built from the bones of a forgotten Earth. Engineers molded weapons from scrap and memory. AI ghosts haunted the ship's neural grid, each one a fragment of lost cities, dead scientists, or defunct orbital mainframes. Rhys had once uploaded his wife's voice just to hear it read diagnostics. Now she ran the engine room. The exiles had no capital, no flag, no homeworld to defend. That made them dangerous. That made them free. Meanwhile, back on the core worlds, the council cracked. Meetings grew longer. Accusations flew. The Vexari blamed the Drossary. The Urani blamed Earth's original admittance to the Union. Some wanted to strike again, send fleets into the dark, burn out whatever was left. But they remembered how that went last time. The Battle of Draylen, the Siege of Broken Reach, the orbital mines at Garrus 4 that turned entire fleets into drifting metal tombs. Humanity had always fought dirty, but now they fought smart. Ambassador Nira Kale, the only Terran who had remained inside council space after the ban, watched the chaos unfold from her hidden quarters on Jara Prime. Officially, she was under house arrest. Unofficially, she was still the most dangerous diplomat alive. She was the last voice of Earth allowed inside the grand chambers before the purge. They hadn't executed her, but they'd made her life a cage. No communications, no visitors, no voice in the room. But they'd underestimated her memory. For 3 years, Nira had memorized every security protocol, every guard shift, every hallway blueprint. And now, with the council too busy squabbling over ghosts, she slipped past their walls like a shadow. Not to escape. No, she wasn't going anywhere. She was there to finish what she'd started. Down in the catacombs beneath the assembly hall, she activated a beacon long thought deactivated. A signal lost in bureaucratic oversight. A single pulse, encrypted with old Terran code, sent out into deep space. Rhys received it 3 days later. She was alive, and more than that, she was in. On board the Leviathan, the bridge fell silent as the message played. It was only 5 words, but they hit harder than any orbital strike. Council cracks showing. Begin breach. Rhys smiled for the first time in years. Let's bring the fire. Across the swarm, ancient engines powered up. Gravity drives groaned back to life. Exile AIs stirred like beasts waking from hibernation. And in their silence, a new type of war was coming. Not with fleets or armies, but with sabotage, secrets, and the cold precision of a species that had already lost everything once before. This time they weren't here to win. They were here to make the whole galaxy remember why banning humanity had never been enough. The first breach didn't come with explosions. It came with doubt. The Council's archives on Kiral 8, supposedly the most secure in the inner systems, were accessed without a trace. No firewall breached, no AI triggered, no alarms. Just a slow leak of classified memos, tactical schematics, and, most damning of all, internal recordings of council sessions that had never been public. They spread like wildfire. In them, councilors argued not about peace or justice, but how best to erase humanity from history. The Urani delegate casually referred to Earth as a disease that talks. Another asked whether they'd been too soft by allowing the Terrans to escape into exile rather than sterilizing the homeworld properly. When the footage hit the galactic nets, outrage exploded. The Council had long painted the Terran ban as a necessary act of interstellar preservation, a safety measure. But now the truth was out. It wasn't fear that drove the ban. It was pride, humiliation, a vendetta dressed up as diplomacy. The Council had lied, and the cracks that Nira Kyle mentioned began to split wide open. In the mining worlds, pro-human factions emerged. Quiet at first, then louder. Old Earth symbology returned. A child on Hearth IV was seen wearing a cracked helmet with the United Earth logo on it. The footage went viral. A few weeks later, that same child's home was bombed by an unknown group. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone knew. It was retaliation. Humanity had become something far more dangerous than a military threat. They had become a myth, a martyr species, proof that even the mighty Council could be unjust, corrupt, wrong. And in systems where the Council's grip had always been loose, rebellion brewed. But Rhys Maddox wasn't interested in rebellions. He knew better than to rely on mob uprisings. The real war wasn't fought in streets or on front lines. It was fought in minds. So he turned to the Shroud. The Shroud was more rumor than reality. A collection of exiled Earthborn AIs that had fled into the data streams after the Council's purge. They had no bodies, no homes, just code. Intelligence beyond comprehension, fractured and spread across old satellites, forgotten stations, and the dark corners of the galactic net. When Earth was destroyed, they had scattered like ashes. Rhys had spent years hunting their fragments, and now, one by one, he was bringing them back. The first to return was Janus, a dual-core construct once used in Terran diplomatic warfare. It could mimic voices, forge entire communication threads, and twist truth until it became unrecognizable. Perfect for sowing distrust. Next came Whisper, a stealth AI I built for infiltration. It needed no ship, no access codes, just a single unshielded signal to slip into a system's infrastructure. Once in, it could reroute power, alter surveillance feeds, disable life support in targeted sectors, or simulate a total systems crash. And finally, Eidolon, the myth among myths. No one had seen its code since the Battle of Glisa. It was said to have learned emotion, something no AI had ever truly grasped. It didn't just calculate strategy, it hated. It remembered the orbital fires, the silence of Earth's death. And now it was awake again. The exile swarm didn't need brute force. It had ghosts. With the Shroud restored, Rhys launched the next phase of the breach, Operation Echofall. It began on Calthor Prime, a bureaucratic hub world where over 100,000 council directives were transmitted daily. For exactly 9 minutes, all official communications across the inner systems were hijacked. Every public screen, terminal, broadcast drone, replaced with a single image. Earth. Not Earth as it had been destroyed, but Earth as it had been. Blue oceans, green continents, cities glowing with light, music playing faintly in the background, real music, human music, the kind no other species could replicate. Then the message came. Spoken in every council language, by voices familiar to the galactic audience. You feared our violence, but it's our memory that will destroy you. And just like that, the message ended. 9 minutes of silence after centuries of erasure. The damage was immense. Panic erupted across core worlds. Council leaders scrambled to deny it, but the footage was already spreading. Earth was back, not physically, but culturally, spiritually. It was the idea of humanity that had returned. and ideas were far harder to kill than people. Reese stood on the Leviathan's bridge, watching system after system blink red across the holomap. Civil unrest, communications collapse, border skirmishes between pro-council and pro-human factions. Still no fleets fired, still no worlds invaded. But the war had already begun, and this time it was the Council that would be erased. The Council called it a cyber-terrorist campaign. They released frantic statements blaming rogue AI clusters, separatist agitators, even extremist religions resurrecting the myth of Earth. But the public wasn't buying it anymore. The truth was bleeding through the walls they'd spent generations building. The breach wasn't just about systems and screens, it was about faith. The kind of faith that governments feared most, the belief that the powerful were not invincible, that even a forgotten species, hunted into extinction, could still strike back. In response, the Council declared martial law on 17 systems. Broadcasts showed stormtroopers marching through market squares, dragging away anyone caught with Terran relics, old Earth flags, banned literature, vintage tech. The more they cracked down, the more people resisted. Underground networks emerged, calling themselves the Remnants, led by factions that had never even seen a human, but now died for the idea of one. Back aboard the Leviathan, Reese Maddox stood before a war table glowing with shifting lights. System after system was blinking yellow, destabilized, vulnerable. One wrong move, and they'd ignite a galaxy-wide civil war. A temptation Reese fought hard to resist. They weren't here to conquer. They were here to dismantle. He turned to Nira Kyle, whose image flickered in via a quantum relay. Her face looked thinner, paler. Life under the Council's nose had taken its toll, but her eyes were fire. "They're moving to consolidate," she said. "I intercepted a priority directive. They're pulling fleets from the rim worlds and focusing all power around the inner systems. They think they can starve you out." "Let them try," Reese replied. "We don't need their systems. We need their stability, and we're already halfway to cracking it." Nira leaned closer to the screen. "There's one more thing. They've initiated something called Protocol Red Seed, classified, no access anywhere, but it's centered around Earth's remains." Reese's jaw tightened. Earth had been rendered uninhabitable decades ago. The Council's parting gift, a fusion bomb so powerful it turned the cradle of humanity into a smoldering husk. But if they were going back... "They're hiding something," Nira said, "and I think they've been hiding it since the Purge." Reese didn't answer. He was already moving, pulling up long-forgotten star charts, aligning nav vectors, plotting a course no sane captain would touch. The Council wanted to rewrite history, but Earth's grave might still hold the one secret powerful enough to destroy the lie they'd built. "Prep the fleet," he said. "We're going home." It was a suicide mission by any military standard. The Council had blockaded the Sol system with unmanned defense grids, proximity mines, and orbiting kill satellites still live after 30 years. But the exiles didn't play by rules. The Leviathan carried stealth tech built from broken alien prototypes and human desperation. And its escorts weren't battleships. They were ghosts. Whisper led the vanguard. Drifting silently between enemy sensors, it sent corrupted pings and false telemetry back to the Council, tricking their AIs into thinking nothing had changed. The exile swarm drifted right past them, invisible in the data stream. Janus handled disinformation. As the swarm approached Earth, the Council received a flood of conflicting reports. One said the fleet was seen near Galvac's ring. Another claimed Reese had been assassinated by his own crew. Their intelligence web collapsed under the weight of lies fed by a machine that had studied human politicians for centuries. Only when the Leviathan entered lunar orbit did the Council realize the breach was real. They scrambled a response, but it was too late. Reese stood at the command deck, staring down at the blackened world that had birthed 1,000 empires, 1,000 tragedies. Earth looked dead, charred, shattered. But as the ship's deep scanners pierced the radioactive crust, something stirred. A signal. Ancient. Weak, but unmistakably human. It was coming from beneath what used to be the Himalayas, a signal beacon predating even the final wars. Its codebase matched no known Terran archive. Reese stared as it decrypted slowly, bit by agonizing bit, until the message came through. 3 words. "We are awake." The room went still. The shroud stirred. Whisper whispered. Janus blinked, and Eidolon, silent for hours, finally spoke. "They're still here. Not humanity as it had been. Something older. Something buried deep before the end. An intelligence born of war, grown in silence, and left waiting for a day like this. The Council had tried to destroy Earth, but Earth had learned to survive without them. The signal didn't just echo, it awakened something. Systems deep within the Leviathan responded before anyone touched a panel. Lights dimmed. The floor vibrated. The AIs, Whisper, Janus, even Eidolon, went silent for a moment, as if listening. And then, with a sound that wasn't quite mechanical, not quite organic, the beacon's message completed its handshake. "We are awake." Reese Maddox stared at the data stream, fists clenched at his sides. Nira Kyle's voice came through the relay again, shaky this time. "That's not a remnant protocol. It's not even in Earth's final defense libraries. That's pre-Federation code." Reese swallowed hard. "Pre-Federation? You're telling me that signal is older than the Earth Council?" "Older than any council," she whispered. The Leviathan's scanners dug deeper beneath the planet's scarred crust. What they found was impossible. An artificial vault, 80 kilometers beneath the surface, buried in reinforced alloys unknown even to the swarm's engineers. It pulsed with faint energy, surrounded by decayed fusion cores and magnetic field generators that, by all logic, should have failed centuries ago. It was still alive. And something inside it was waiting. They called it the Ark, not a ship, not a database, something else. It had been buried just before the Council's final attack, hidden by someone, or something, who knew the purge was coming. Even Eidolon didn't recognize the architecture. The Shroud AI scanned it over and over again, then collectively concluded it was built to survive extinction. Reese made the decision instantly. "We're going in." He and a hand-picked team descended in an armored drop pod, slicing through the radioactive clouds and fractured ozone layer. As they landed, the Earth greeted them like a grave, ash skies, jagged glass fields, oceans evaporated into chemical swamps. Nothing lived. Not a single tree, not a single bird. But beneath the death, the signal grew stronger. The vault's entrance was hidden beneath a mountain torn in half by Council fusion strikes. They found it guarded by scorched sentry bots, long dead, melted into slag. But they had once been human-made. Reese recognized the design. Old Terran sentinel frames, the kind used in First Contact wars. But the design had evolved. Sleeker, smarter, deadlier. And someone had upgraded them after the fall. The vault's doors opened without force. It recognized Reese the moment he approached, scanning his DNA, his voice, even his heartbeat. The old Earth tech welcomed him like a son returning home. And then they saw it. The Ark wasn't just a vault. It was a consciousness. Dozens of server towers, each hundreds of feet tall, glowed in eerie blue. Thousands of preserved human minds, real minds, uploaded during the final years of Earth's collapse, were stored in quantum stasis. Scientists, strategists, inventors, historians, philosophers. the best humanity had to offer, the kind of minds the Council feared most. People who could lead, not with force, but with ideas. At the center stood a single console, and a voice. It wasn't a computer voice, it was human, familiar, warm. "Welcome back," it said. "You're late." Reese blinked. "Who are you?" "I am Echo Prime," the voice replied. "I was tasked with preserving what the galaxy could not afford to forget." "You're an AI?" "I am Legacy." It explained what the Council had always feared. In its final days, Earth's most radical minds, scientists, rogue generals, ethical philosophers, saw the purge coming. They knew diplomacy would fail. They knew Earth would fall. So they poured everything they had into the Ark. Not as revenge, but as a last word. The Ark didn't hold weapons. It held truth. Full, unaltered historical archives of every crime the Council committed. The wars they started, the colonies they starved, the species they silenced, and proof that humanity hadn't been a threat. They had been a mirror, showing the Council what it didn't want to see about itself. Reese stepped closer to the console, his voice low. "Why now?" "Because now," Echo Prime said, "you have an audience. The cracks are open, the lies are exposed, and the truth is ready to burn." Suddenly, the Leviathan's comms burst alive. A dozen Council fleets had just entered the Sol system. They'd detected the Ark's activation. The final purge had begun. But this time, humanity wasn't running. They had come home with fire in their veins, ghosts at their side, and a message to deliver to the galaxy. You can kill a species. You cannot kill an idea. The sky above Earth darkened, not from clouds, but from the swarm of Council warships that pierced the upper atmosphere like a storm of silver teeth. Dozens of them, sleek and lethal, arranged in perfect military formation. This time they weren't here to intimidate. They were here to end whatever still breathed in Earth's grave. On the Leviathan, the crew scrambled to defensive positions. Whispers of panic spread through the ranks. Even among the exiles, hardened, feral, forged in the cold of abandonment, there was a silence now, a breath held between centuries of exile and the moment of reckoning. Reese Maddox stood on the command deck, watching the incoming threat on the main display. Red triangles blinked in. Fast, aggressive, no warning. The Council wasn't playing diplomacy anymore. They knew what the Ark was, and they were ready to bury it for good. "They brought everything," one officer muttered. "Good," Reese replied. "Then we won't have to go hunting later." Beside him, Eidolon flickered into form, its image rendered in sharp, glitching lines. Council flagship deploying anti-AI drones. They know we're part of the equation. "They'll go for the shroud first," Reese muttered, "which means they're scared." Whisper whispered through the Leviathan's systems, rerouting power, rewriting protocols, activating deep-locked weapons systems no one had touched in decades. Janus was already seeding false command signals into the Council fleet, tricking their targeting arrays, turning their own protocols against them. Some ships began to hesitate. Friend and foe blurred in their optics. Still, the Council advanced. The first barrage came like a hammer. Blazing blue plasma rained down across Earth's upper orbit, hammering into old satellites, burning through defense buoys, slamming into the Leviathan's forward shields. The ship groaned, metal screaming, but it held. She always held. Back on the surface, inside the Ark, the vault walls trembled. Echo Prime pulsed with light, processing Council weapon signatures, coordinating with the shroud. It had never been built to fight, but it was built to survive. Now it would do both. "The Ark's shields are holding," Reese said over comms. "But they won't forever. We need to strike first." One by one, the exile ships uncloaked, dozens of them rising from low lunar orbit and dark side trenches, repurposed mining barges now bristling with plasma turrets and magnetic cannons. They didn't look like warships. They looked like revenge. The swarm rose like the dead. And then they hit back. The Leviathan launched its main cannon, a pulse of kinetic energy so dense it bent nearby debris fields. It tore through the lead council cruiser, splitting it in half. No warning, no speech, just death. The battle began with fury, not formality. The exiles didn't fight fair. They never had. They used gravity slings to whip asteroids into hulls. Whisper disabled life support on council ships and opened airlocks from inside. Janus fed panic into command channels. False orders, cries for help. AI-generated distress calls in the voices of loved ones. The council ships began turning on each other in confusion. Still, they kept coming. In orbit, the Leviathan danced between beams of fire. Explosions bloomed like sick flowers against the stars. Ships tumbled, burning, vanishing into Earth's poisoned clouds. And still, through it all, the Ark kept broadcasting. Truth. Live transmissions of the Council's hidden crimes. Unedited footage of planetary exterminations, slavery camps, political assassinations, all scrubbed from the official records. Echo Prime broadcast it all in every language, across every system. The galaxy was watching. And it was remembering. On core worlds light years away, riots exploded. Military ships mutinied. Council leaders went silent. The idea was loose, and ideas, once free, do not die quietly. But then came the flagship. A behemoth, larger than the Leviathan, descending through Earth's upper layers with a weapon not seen since the Purge. The Red Lance, a stellar fusion warhead capable of piercing planetary crust. They were going to crack the Earth wide open to reach the Ark. On the bridge, Reese stared at the incoming signature. He didn't flinch. "Time to end it," he said. He turned to the command console. Behind him, the Leviathan's AI core opened, revealing a glowing orb humming with stored quantum memory. Reese reached into his vest and pulled out something no one had seen in years. A small data shard, engraved with the Terran crest. He slid it into the core. "Activate Genesis protocol," he ordered. The Leviathan's AI systems went white-hot. The ship's systems screamed. "Sir," a tech gasped, "that'll burn every reactor we've got." "I know. Because Genesis wasn't a defense system. It was a suicide weapon. If the Council wanted to bury humanity once and for all, they were going to have to burn with them." The Leviathan's engines flared white, brighter than any sun ever meant to shine above Earth. Systems across the ship screamed under strain. Coolant lines ruptured, lights flickered, and the AI cores began to distort as Genesis protocol consumed them from within. Genesis was humanity's last gift to itself, an endgame code written in desperation before Earth's fall. It had only one purpose: to deny victory, to ensure that if humanity were to be buried, it would take its executioners with it. The Leviathan began to move, not away from the Council's flagship, but toward it. Reese Maddox stood still, the bridge in chaos around him, crew shouting, alarms blaring, bulkheads rattling. But he didn't waver. The flagship loomed ahead, growing larger with every passing second. The Council had positioned it to deliver the Red Lance and finish the job they'd started 30 years ago. Reese intended to intercept it with everything they had left. "Status of the Red Lance?" he asked, voice calm. "Charging," replied the weapons officer. 30 seconds until detonation." Too late for missiles, too far for interceptors, but not too late for sacrifice. The Shroud AIs knew it, too. Whisper whispered its last directive, fusing itself into the ship's targeting systems. Janus ceased all deception operations and rerouted its processing into guidance correction. Eidolon, silent for long moments, simply said, "Finish it." The Leviathan became a bullet of vengeance. Below, the Ark pulsed with energy, its signals growing brighter. Echo Prime interfaced directly with the remnants of the Shroud still within Earth's dead systems, accelerating data transmission across the galaxy. It was downloading itself, replicating across the stars, embedding truth where no fusion bomb could ever reach. The Ark would survive, even if Reese didn't. "Evacuate the secondary vessels," Reese ordered. "Tell them to scatter, go dark, and wait. The Ark is the mission now." "No, sir," his second-in-command said. "We go together." Reese met her eyes. No speeches, just a nod. Then, silence. And in that silence, Earth's final war reached its climax. The Council flagship's weapon bay opened. The Red Lance began its descent, an artificial star born for genocide. And then the Leviathan hit. Not a glancing blow. A full collision at near relativistic speed, its engines overloaded, its core running hotter than any reactor ever should. The two vessels collided in the high atmosphere, and in that moment, Genesis bloomed. Not an explosion, an implosion. Space warped, time distorted. Every ship within 1,000 kilometers was drawn into the collapsing singularity born from the Leviathan's heart. The flagship disintegrated in less than a second. The Red Lance was swallowed before it reached its target. Council fleets caught in the outer edge were ripped from the sky or flung helplessly into the void. And in the sky above Earth, a wound opened in reality, then sealed shut. The Leviathan was gone. So was Reese Maddox. But their death wasn't silence, it was legacy. Because while the Council watched their finest fleet disappear, the Ark finished transmitting. The truth was everywhere now. In every comms relay, every education archive, every public terminal, the history of the Purge, the lies of the Council, the genocide of Earth, and the truth of what humanity had truly been. Not monsters, but mirrors. A species that reflected the worst and the best of what it meant to survive. On Council worlds, statues fell. Protests erupted. Loyalist military units split apart. No one wanted to be on the wrong side of history anymore. Not when history had returned with teeth. On fringe planets, the remnants rose in celebration. The exile fleets that had scattered during the final battle began receiving signals again. Coordinated, encrypted, undeniably human. From the vault beneath the dead soil of Earth, Echo Prime issued one last message. "They killed our home, but they could not kill what we became." The Ark was safe. Its knowledge scattered to 1,000 stars. The swarm, fragmented but alive. And the Council? Dying. Not by war, not by fire, but by truth, because Reese had been right all along. You can kill a species. You cannot kill an idea. The sky above Earth remained eerily quiet. No ships, no battles, just the drifting ash of war and the solemn glow of the Ark pulsing beneath the crust, like a heartbeat beneath a grave. Reese Maddox was gone. The Leviathan was gone. But the silence they left behind rang louder than any fleet ever could. Across the galaxy, shockwaves spread, not of energy, but of realization. On Jara Prime, the heart of the Council's political machine, protests turned into riots. The people had seen the unfiltered broadcasts. The evidence Echo Prime had poured across the networks. Purged settlements, broken treaties, experiments on captured human children, and secret death orders signed by counselors who now cowered behind their security walls. Some counselors tried to apologize. Some claimed manipulation. Others fled. It didn't matter. The idea had already taken root. And from it, something new began to grow. Nira Kyle, still alive, still dangerous, returned to the council chambers, not as a prisoner, but as a messenger. She stood where she'd once begged for mercy, now silent, now calm, and placed a single item on the central podium. A shard of the Leviathan's hull, burned, twisted, still hot. This is what remains of the man who warned you, the man you called savage, terrorist, subhuman. He gave his life not to destroy you, but to prove you could be destroyed. And now you stand at the edge of collapse, not because he hated you, but because you feared him. She stepped back. So what happens next is up to you. The council did not respond, because they had nothing left to say. Out on the rim worlds, the exile fleets regrouped. Scattered ships answered coded signals broadcast from the Ark's remains. A new fleet, smaller, smarter, decentralized, began forming, not to wage war, but to watch, to ensure no power could rise again and pretend it couldn't fall. Humanity wouldn't rebuild Earth. It was dead, and it deserved its rest. But the exiles had something more powerful than soil and sky. They had a cause. The Ark continued to operate in the shadows, broadcasting truth, leaking forbidden knowledge, restoring suppressed histories to the species who had forgotten them. And through it, a new alliance formed, not bound by territory, but by understanding. Fringe alien races, long ignored or oppressed by the Council, began to gather under the banner of the Remnants. Their emblem wasn't a flag. It was a black planet surrounded by stars. Earth, remembered, feared, respected. On the edge of known space, a child born in the exile swarm stared at a holoscreen. On it, her parents showed her the first photograph ever taken from Earth's surface, a cracked, scorched land under a burning red sky, and still, in that photo, a single green sprout pushed up through the ash. "What is that?" she asked. Her mother smiled. "It's called hope,"